Welcome back to Split Test Your Landing Page for More Leads and Sales. We just went over those landing page audits, and now we're going into parts 3 and 4, the testing fundamentals, and then actually launching your split test and measuring it. So let's get into it.
Yeah! We're moving now into testing fundamentals and launching and measuring. As I said kind of earlier on, like this is kind of the section that it's kind of the more like step by step, here's how you do this. This is kind of like how you get this stuff launched, because we did focus a lot on how to identify opportunities on pages. That's really the first step. Because we can just say all day like, oh man, if we just change this and change this, it'd be great. And then if we don't change anything or test it out to prove it, then we've just wasted some time. So we've learned how to identify landing pages and identify opportunity areas on them. Now we need to figure out how we can test these things, how to use the tools to test these things, and then how to actually measure it. Cool, so all right. Fundamentals. I was so proud of that. Great. So, I mean, really the first thing you kind of dig into when you're starting to look and identify pages and those types of things, which we aren't going to have to do too much, is looking at Google Analytics. Like if you weren't like just focused and hyper-focused on landing pages for this training, you'd have to start digging in there to try and figure out, what are your high traffic pages, what are pages that are underperforming, and all that fun stuff. And generally, you dig into here in landing pages, and this is for one of our campaigns, where I can learn a few things from here. When our goal stuff's set up correctly, I can learn a lot more. Or if I'm using an advanced segment, I could learn a bunch of stuff. But one of the things that it does tell me, with pages per session being 1.96 for people here, it's telling me that people are more often than not converting. Like if I was getting something that was like 1.1 there, because it takes 2 pages at least to kind of go there, you can make that assumption, which these convert at roughly, well, this last one's been converting between 45–50%, which has been good. So it's a fairly healthy page, bounce rates down, those types of things. But you're not going to really have to dig into this too much, because really I want you to focus on landing pages that you already have. And if you don't have landing pages, you need to look at your campaigns and kind of identify where you need one. So I know I asked like earlier, I think everybody's has a landing page or like uses landing pages. I believe at least in here that was the case. But not a lot of people have been running tests. So we don't have to worry about Google Analytics as much for this stuff. It does become really, really important when you start testing more holistically across the funnel. So this is VWO, Visual Website Optimizer. This is what we use for split testing internally. I recommend, for kind of solidarity's sake, that we use this tool during this execution cycle. They do have a free option up to 1,000 tested visitors, which should be enough to kind of prove what you're trying to do. Their paid version is $49 a month, so that shouldn't be too much of a sticking point, especially if you'll be able to kind of get the return on that investment very, very quickly if you're able to create tests that will actually move the needle, which is kind of the whole point of this course. But I really wanted to use a free tool, specifically Google Optimize, and like every 6 or 7 months, like I'll just trash it, and then go, hey, maybe it got better. Didn't. Trash it. And you can use Google Optimize, but you have to install a specific piece of code for campaign for every individual test, which kind of takes the point away from using like a standard editor that's using like an asynchronous JavaScript. So I'd recommend using this. Okay, so types of tests. There's A/B tests, multivariate tests, and sequential tests. I'm going to talk about these two first because we're not doing these, but I do want you to know the difference between the different types of testing out there because it's easy to kind of get confused. Multivariate tests. In general, I just say just don't do these. Most surveys out there, what they show that they're too complex. They're too difficult to read. They require like a metric butt ton of traffic. Like think like New York like subway system amount of traffic coming through there in order to pull these things off, and they're not worth it. What they do is they measure the different combinations of variables. So you'd have, say if you changed a headline and image in a form, it would do, and you had like 3 variations of each. it would then do a full factorial assessment of those and be like, hey, here's how like this, when these three are together, it converts like this. When these three are together, it's like this. It gets really, really granular in its useful data, but it's only reserved for like the biggest companies out there. And even then, they don't even use it that much anymore. Multivariate testing's kind of gotten out of the old like highlights there. Sequential testing. Oh, this is one after another. So let's say you have your traffic, and then you have a page that happens, and it converts at 22%. Say maybe 2 weeks later, you try another. You run this for 2 weeks, and you try another, and that one's at 30%. The problem with this type of testing is that it doesn't account for one of the most important variables when you're thinking about split testing, and that is time. People act very differently at different times of the year. People act very differently at different times of the day. Okay, so this is useful if and only if you have reliable historic conversion data. I'm talking years of that. So for us, whenever we run these types of tests, we run them on multiple funnels across different offers on something where we have data for the last 3 years. So we know what those conversion rates generally are, and we can kind of make that assessment because it's now somewhat time agnostic. Okay? Now the real deal, the stuff we're actually going to be talking about and doing. There's 2 types of A/B tests that are out there. When you're thinking about how you construct tests within an editor, you have the split URL test, and then you have the visual editor test. Okay, and how A/B testing functions is you have traffic goes to one page, another traffic goes to another. It's just split randomly. You can set it for different different segments and different sets there, but just generally takes your whole traffic set, we'll throw it there, and sees which one converts best over time, and then it'll tell you, which one was the winner. This is an example of a visual editor in Visual Website Optimizer, and it's a WYSIWYG editor, so it stands for what you see is what you get. Generally, what you see is what you think you get, but anyways. But this is a way to describe how people describe visual editors. They're generally super easy to use and used to be the unique selling proposition for a lot of these types of tools, but most people have kind of stopped using them except for a very limited cases, and I'll show you those limited cases. If those cases, when you're looking at your 15-page audit, if you're not doing kind of smaller scale tests that fit within that, you're going to have to run a split URL. Okay, so here's an example here. This is the Visual Website Optimizer kind of like A/B test campaign. This isn't a new campaign. You just toss in a URL. It'll load the page in there, and it'll make everything on the page editable. The problem when everything's editable is it messes with the code. That's why you can't do major structural things, right? The things you can do are mainly like, hey, I'm going to change a link or a button CTA or a headline. And even if you start messing with headlines, if it takes too much, if you have to reformat it in any way because maybe there's too much text to fit on the initial line, you can run into problems, right? So here's kind of like, and I have a bunch of screenshots of how all this works. So say like, I say, okay, now I'm in here, I want to change a link on a button. So here's my add to cart. When this comes here, it drops down and you have a lot of options, change URL, change text, move, like these are all like the no-no buttons. Don't mess with that. Styles, the custom style sheets you can mess with because that would just be replacing those. Hide or remove, they're still going to run into issues. Edit HTML I like better than really anything because you are just kind of editing that portion of the HTML versus kind of messing around with things. Rearrange, don't do that. Track clicks, that's fine because it's just going to track what's happening. But you're really, really limited in here in what you can do because it messes with the code and just breaks stuff. And it's the worst thing you could ever do is run a test and you say you have say you're always running tests using this type of editor and you're moving stuff around, like, man, my control always wins. Likely because your control's not broken, right? So just kind of fair warning. So then you click in, I was like, hey, change URL, just switch that out. And hey, I'm done in the editor. So then what you have to end up doing is you start setting goals. And how you can break down the different types of goals in Visual Website Optimizer based off of like form submits, element clicks, link clicks, track page visits. What you need to be looking for is a unique identifier. For us, it's super easy. Like whenever I have to look at anything where there's a purchase in a funnel, I just need to make sure an OTO or a thank you shows up. So that's how I can figure out very quickly. And that's why URL structures and those things are really important. But With this, it's like, all right, so they hit this landing page, they hit this offer. Did they get to an OTO page? If they did, I know they purchased. So have something, like start thinking about what the unique identifier is for the converting action if you're using page URLs. That normally gets things done. But you can also do things at the level of the like form submissions and those things too. But I've found those not to be as reliable in most testing tools out there. So just generally stick with page URL. Cool. Then once you get in here, just kind of set your name, and then you have to kind of isolate by device. If you're using a WYSIWYG editor, only put it on for desktop. or if you're doing a specific mobile optimization, only put it there. Don't put it on multiple devices, because then what you're going to run into are some issues with the with rendering or anything there. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so you break down here. So if you're in this section, you'd scroll down. You'd have segment gallery. Just hit desktop traffic. That's all. Again, I really don't like using these anymore. I've been advocating split tests in these types of tools for a long, long time. This can hurt what your learnings, and also then hurt your business. So be careful when you're using these types of things. And then once your goals are set and you've isolated your device, just click finish and you're ready to go. So remember, if you're using the editor, make sure your test is set for a single device. And if you're using a visual editor, here's the only times you can use it. This is it. Testing links, testing copy, testing images that are the same dimensions. Like it needs to be the exact same dimension. Testing videos. That even gets tricky. Wistia makes it really, 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 really hard because their JavaScript is like a virus. It just expands to a point where you can't isolate it, and then it turns into a problem. For testing videos, I even sometimes just do a split URL because it's easier. And then minor personalization. I told you about some personalization campaigns I ran where I was like, hey, let's have the ad copy show up as the headline and subheadline. That's what I did using VWO as well in a personalization side of things, and that helped things out. So when you're using a visual editor, again, I doubt most people will use the visual editor now after I scared people, which is cool. But you select A/B test on the left-hand side, and these are all use these when you get to the test portions. I have these are all the step-by-step lists of how to do anything within that tool. And then when we get to things like within the elite critique and those things for launching a test, I'll be able to walk people through how to get that stuff done. Because remember, the goal isn't just to identify what needs to be done; it's to get it done and tested, right? So these are just the simple steps. Click create. Name your campaign, paste URL of page, click elements you want to change / replace, name each variation. This is key to remind yourself what you changed. Don't just leave it as control either. Say what the control is, like control button text this, because it's easier for referencing later on, especially if you start doing more of these things. Set your goals, so look for that unique identifier. Set test to only desktop, and then turn test on. Bingo, 10 steps. Not that bad. As you can tell, I'm a little biased towards split URL tests. I like them. It's exactly what it sounds like. You have some URLs, and they split traffic to them. Gives you a lot more control. You're not going to be kind of worried about how any sort of rendering issues, other than maybe unless you have a bad coder or using a landing page tool you don't trust. So simple kind of thing. All you do is go in here, paste your URLs. And then it'll do random segmentation on those, or it'll just randomly split them. And you don't have to worry about breaking down the different devices here. If you're using an Instapage, you have control over how your mobile's designed. If you have internal team members who are coding, they're in control of that. You don't need to worry about that as much, so you can get more data fast. Because as I said, things coming from Facebook or Google or anything like that, that is highly, highly mobile traffic. Even your email traffic. So if you could only focus on desktop, it's gonna take longer to run a test, and you'll find out when you're running tests, you have 4 weeks at most. That's it. All right. So URL options, they have all these different types of match patterns. URL matches just generally takes care of it. If you want to get crazy, you can get into either match patterns if you're doing multiple pages, or match regex or anything like that. But for what we're doing, just use URL matches. Okay. You're going to see this right before you launch a test. It's going to say, it looks like you didn't pay attention to variables or something like that. This is just garbage math. So I don't know how this is there, but like I've run so many like tests on VWO that they say not enough data to be conclusive or to be statistically significant when there's like thousands of conversions in there. And there is a clear winner. I don't know why it does it like that. I just ignore this completely because most of the time it's like, gonna need another week. I was like, you just want me to use more tested visitors. So don't worry so much about this. What I'm gonna teach you how to do in section 4 during, well, now, in a little bit, I'll teach you how to schedule a test and think about kind of the math backwards so you know how long it's going to take you. I also have a handy calculator that you can use for that. So when do you split URL tests? Running radically different designs, have major structural changes. All other times you can't use WYSIWYG, and I guess the fourth would be just do this. It's so much easier. Yeah, it's so much easier to do. All right, so here's how the steps work here. Generally, prior to this, you have the URLs already. You might have to either clone a page and then make your changes and do those types of things. But you generally have those, so select split URL test, click create. Name your campaign, paste URL of control, paste URL of variant. Name each variant, again, important. Click next, set goals, turn it on, done. 9 steps. Really, really simple stuff. Setting up a test is not hard. The hard part is making sure you're getting good data and what to do with it. Okay? So there's 2 types of test themes, essentially. So we talked about the test types you can have, and now we're going to talk about test themes. Test themes I break them down into 2 things: innovation tests and iterative tests. So you noticed when I talked about things like kind of offer clarity when we were doing the audits, I was like, you're not going to have to make major structural changes to the site. Those are iterative tests, when you're making changes to copy or how you articulate the offer. So mostly on like offer visualization of that, articulation, and targeting is not even a page level thing at that point. Those are mostly iterative tests. Innovation tests are when you just need to blow it up. Like it's like we have just major structural problems. The design schema is all off. There's no logical sequence between the messaging and things on the page. That's when you have to start digging into this stuff. So here's an example of an innovation test. And this one even, we had, this is one of the older ones we used to have. This one, we still kept the content relatively the same, but we used different visual depictions, different kind of formatting of it. With kind of a central area there and kind of building out. But really innovation tests, these are your big swings. This even kind of barely qualifies because there's still a lot of things here that are essentially the same. But we see with innovation tests, what you run into is you don't get information on the individual elements. You're going to hear a lot of optimization people, or read a lot of optimization people say, like, oh, just change one element at a time, and that's how you get like conclusive data. It's like, no, if you want to get any sort of data, you likely have to go for a bigger swing. We don't need to know how each individual thing impacted things, whether it was like well, this change was worth, changing it to blue was worth a 5% increase, or this was, you don't need to know that. We're not research institutions. We're not going to be putting those things off. We're businesses, right? But what's interesting in this case, we were like, hey, like this looks like garbage, and this one looks so much better. There was no difference when we ran that one. There was, with the other blue one, that one actually performed a lot better than these 2 right here. Like it was wild. Like this one didn't play as well at this level, but when we did this for different types of guides, this one worked a lot better because it was like one of them was an email marketing metrics guide, and it looked like you could see more into it, and that one performed a lot better. But this, for blog post templates, this doesn't look like a blog post template to them. So there was no difference. The design, I think, was definitely more intuitive and fit within our ads, but no, didn't really do anything. And even with the big swing tests, you can miss. Rule of thumb, though, if run an innovation test if you score likely a 70 or below on your 15-point audit, and if you're looking more at, if it's on the visual hierarchy one. If the visual hierarchy is low on there, you're likely going to have to do one of these. And if you score low on visualization, those are the ones that are going to be like, oh, I need to kind of try something new, right? Now here's an example of somewhat of an iterative test. All the copy here is to the same. We just kind of changed the background image. Because I was like, I think this one was the control, and this one was like, I bet people like arrows, but then you have like arrows going against each other, which is, yeah, anyways. But these are small and precise changes, so when you're running iterative tests, you're in polish mode, right? You've kind of seen a jump from an innovation test, and now you're iterating upon those to kind of get better results, to get more out of it. If you only do iterative tests, you're going to reach what is called a local maxima, which is the highest level you can get on that hill, essentially. It will only go so high, right? So that's why if you catch yourself running like iterative tests for months on like the same page, stop. You're not going to go much higher than that. So this one actually saw a 13% increase in invitations, so the control one. My idea of like, hey, arrows up, and then you said this earlier today, we were like, this arrow up and this telling us to go down, I just completely confused people there. I have two different arrows. All right, anyways. So rule of thumb here, you run iterative tests if you score likely like a 71 or higher, and if it's mainly within kind of offer and trust and form in there, and it doesn't have anything to do with visualization. Those are kind of the areas that you hang around in there when you're doing your audit. So now we talked a lot about kind of like design structure and thinking about, how do I pick new designs? Because if we're going to blow a whole page up or try a template test or anything like that, what am I going to do? Here's a free site I look at, which is a design search engine. You go in. It's like you just need to give like an email address or something. Or I think I signed up with it's with Facebook because that's my gorilla picture. But you go in here and you dig through designs essentially. So here's what I do is I filter page based on my industry, find designs I like, look at what's consistent between each design. That's what's important. Don't just find one design you like and go, bam, that's it. That's the one I want to use. Look at what's consistent within your industry. Okay, because what your competitors are using and what's consistent within your industry, likely that's what your customers used to seeing or what your prospects are used to seeing. Okay, then ask, am I missing that? And then finally, should I add it? So here's an example here where I said landing page, desktop, consumer services. Say I was in the lawn care industry, and I was like, man, like my landing pages just aren't hitting. And maybe what I was leading with, hey, give me your email address, like that trucker site I was talking about earlier today. Where I'm saying, hey, man, all of my competitors are leading with zip code. That's odd. Like, I don't do that. Maybe that's something I should try out, which would be an iterative test, but would be worth seeing from either an element standpoint or a total design standpoint as well. So this is a great jump-off point, but then you're going to go, well, Justin, like, I don't have a designer, and what I'm going to tell you when you pick these things is to stop for a second. You're going to want to be like, oh, like, I have this one page that looks kind of like that. If I move some things around and I do these things, don't do that. Unless you're a designer or a coder, do not. If you're using a landing page builder and you find yourself like really, really breaking any sort of foundations like within the structure, stop, because you're going to create something terrible. What you're going to create is this. This is one of the worst pages like I've seen, and it's from Honest Company. They're a big company, but someone on their team was like, I need to build something quickly, and it just doesn't have any sense of focus or cohesion. Start my trial, but connect with Facebook. Talking more about things here, but there's nothing else under there to kind of give me more information. Baby's pointing away from the main CTA. There's free shipping, but I'm getting a free trial. Like, what's going on here? Nothing on this thing makes sense. And likely that's what you're going to run into if you just start kind of plugging and playing, which is why you have to kind of stick to templates for now. Again, remember, it completely starts as one size fits all, then go to custom. Get yourself 80% of the way there, and then go to do that. Go to find what works best. As optimizers, people who are running split tests, what you're trying to do, you're trying to find outlying results. Okay? When you have an industry standard of this is what conversion rates are in ed tech, this is what they are in SaaS, this is what they are here. when you're optimizing, you're trying to find a way to like game that and beat that. You want to be the outlier. You can't start off trying to be that. If you try to like just change everything, you're going to end up with this. So start at 80%, get yourself there with minimal work, then make the move, okay? So this is what I use for rapid prototyping. It's a tool called Instapage. I know a lot of people are using like Thrive themes and some other things. Like apparently that's great. They also have, I think they're putting in a split test tool. Awesome. Use that too if you want, like for your stuff. Use whatever your preferred tool is. If you're not using one, I use this because it's just like you'd have to really try to be bad at this. It's really, really simple and it's affordable. But inside Instapage, like here's an example of kind of, we actually did this for our roadshow the other day, where they have a really large template library. They use a visual editor that's drag and drop, which also, whenever I hear drag and drop, I definitely hear the word dragon every time. It's drag and drop. Cool. But you have a lot of control over that stuff. You have mobile design control where you can switch over to there, and you can, like I said, it's not just rendering it for mobile. You can kind of change the sections and make sure you have a prioritization, the correct prioritization. And then drag and drop, I can't get over how easy that is to use here. This, generally, you can put your own HTML in there, but you can put in blocks, headlines, paragraphs, images, videos, buttons, forms. You can put in your own HTML for your own videos or for your own forms so they don't have direct integrations. You can drop in timers, social proof, all sorts of fun stuff. And it's crazy, crazy easy to use. Normally when I'm looking for templates for this, I look for the templates with good bones. The ones that I can like be like, all right, can scrap like, oh, don't need that section because it's like, it's one, like for here, it's like it wouldn't need testimonials. Get rid of the testimonial section. So look for pages with the good bones, and that might be something like during one of the, we can talk about either in one of the Q&As and those things, like what I mean by that and how I start looking at that type of stuff to help people look for template tests. So Instapage limitations, you have zero control over load speeds. And in the landing page world, speedliness is next to godliness or something like that. I think that's cleanliness. But you need to pay attention to load speeds in general, but you don't have that control here. Also, it's a third-party tool. If a third-party tool goes down, you got nothing. So that's why anytime we do Instapage stuff, we look at that from a rapid prototyping side of things, where I have an idea or something I want to improve, I try it this way. If it works, I get it coded out. It also saves us on resources, because what if I had this great idea, and then I go to Eric, it's like his nightmare, go into his office, and I go, hey, bud, Eric, I need you to make me something. He's like, and then I go, oh, we're not going to use that now. like we tried it, didn't work. He's like, why would you have me code that? You definitely want to have this for rapid prototyping. So I mean, they have a template library that's fantastic. They break it down by lead generation, lead gen two-step, click through. They'll even classify other things like webinar pages, mobile app, those types of things. And if they don't have a theme you want or something you want that you saw in Crayon, go to any theme place. They cost like 18, 20 bucks, and it's well worth it. Yeah.
We have a question from the live stream, and they want to know, where do you find the industry data for conversion rates?
So where I get a lot of my stuff on e-commerce is Monetate has a report they put out every quarter. Not a lot of people are publishing that. Maybe like eConsultancy puts some things out. People haven't been doing benchmark reports in a while, which I think we should do. Because I don't know why they stopped doing it. It used to be like one of the biggest things that people did. But there's a few kind of like older school publications that I think will put some things out. I'll find some resources to send to people if you can remind me, because I'll forget unless. Cool. All right. Yeah. So here we are. And also, actually, another play could be we should share with your elite people how you're doing. I think especially during this portion here, when you're running these types of tests, let's talk about it. I know in Engage, people talk about hey, I'm seeing this sort of CPC on these things or this CPA. I mean, you can start talking about these things from an acquisition standpoint, from a landing page perspective as well, insofar as you're okay with sharing it. But another thing. So Instapage use steps, pick a template, really just color within the lines, don't go too crazy. Don't like a template, buy a theme, put in your relevant content, add tracking, super easy to do. Like they just cut down hey, what's your Google Analytics? What's this? You're fine. Fill in SEO details with metadata and those things. Complete mobile view, that should have a million exclamation points right there, because that's super crucial. And then just publish the page. And you can publish the page to WordPress. You can use one of their links. You can do whatever you really want there. So really, I see the minimum viable test stack for what we're working with right now, insofar as you don't have something already, is I'd say if you can get trials of these two things during this execution cycle, give them a shot, because I'll be able to whip things up with people. I'll be able to talk with you through a lot of the stuff in there. If you go with lead pages, I don't use lead pages anymore, so I haven't used it in a while. Or if you're using any other kind of tool, I could point you in the direction of places, but these are the ones that I know. The other ones will take me a little bit longer to respond. So, cool. So, innovative test setup steps, really kind of simple stuff here. You pick your test type, whether it's an A/B, multivariate, or sequential. In this case, we're all doing A/B tests. Select your page to test. Take a look at different landing pages. I'd say if you have a good amount of landing pages, or ones that are running traffic to, put them all through the audit. The reason I had all of us do those audits together was because I didn't want your first audit to be on your own page, right? I wanted you to get the reps in and understand that stuff, and also kind of give you a view, because you could have a page that you're just I think this one could do better, and then you're well, this other one has more of an opportunity for something that requires maybe less landing page design work or those types of things. So start weighing those options. They're really, really important. Run the 15-point audit. Find the new page template. If it's a template test, this is an innovative test, so it's a new page template. Update page in your landing page builder. Publish it. Create new split URL test in your testing tech. Paste control on variant URLs. Set your goals. Launch. It's 10 points. 10 steps. Iterative test setup. And mostly with iterative tests, these fall within visual editor. They'll generally fall, you're changing a headline, you're changing a title, you're changing out a link, you're changing out the color of something, you're changing out an image, right? Select page to test, run your audit, create new A/B test in testing tech, paste control URL, switch out your elements, set your goals, set to desktop only, unless you actually QA it and can get it on mobile, launch test. Oops, that was 9. So, a lot of kind of steps to do with these types of things, but I think in most cases, the easiest thing for us to do based on some of the designs I've seen, and based on what I've just seen in general, just try a template test out on something, and try using a landing page builder for that, is what I'd recommend. Cool, so that would normally be the break, but these are now all together. Yeah, these are all together now. And now we get into launch and measure. Are there any questions about kind of the fundamentals of things, kind of the tools that I suggested, anything like that before we move into launching and measuring? Because this is probably the densest part.
I think they're all just kind of, there's some people who are very unfamiliar with some of this tech and some of the finer points of it. So I guess maybe just explain we're 5 a little bit of the testing fundamentals. So, you're what exactly, just very, very boiled down, simplified.
Okay, so more of the fundamentals or more the kind of the latter part?
The tech, yeah, the tech.
The tech, okay. So your testing technology, what that does, all that thing is it's a randomization tool with a statistics engine in it that does statistics. That's it. So what you're doing is really not even getting into the visual editor stuff, with the split URL stuff, because this is the easiest stuff and what I recommend to use. All it's doing is randomizing traffic to 2 URLs. That's all that's happening. And then you've defined within the tech what you believe to be the goal. So I'm saying, so if I say, hey, I want to send people to this entry point offer page for $10 a day traffic plan, and I want to try 2 variants out. I have the 2 URLs, and I know they've purchased when we have an OTO in our URL. So it's when you set your goal, it just goes like, how do you know like the goal was completed? And that's how I know from my page URL. So I mean, you'll all see that. You'll see like parameters pushed into your URL from purchases or from leads or anything like that. You'll see that stuff. There's also like if you can't get it to work, like this is more, nope, this isn't for that's not for 5-year-olds. I'm not going to talk about that one. That one's, you can use Google to create advanced segments if you needed to. But really, it's a randomization tool that will monitor the traffic going to each page and then calculate the goals that you define. And then